Who knows the story of the Princess and the Pea? Who feels comfortable telling the story of the Princess and the Pea? Chris.
So this is how I've heard it. The princess ran away from the castle. She needed a place to stay. She said that she was the princess. The people welcomed her in, but they didn't necessarily believe her, so they piled up a bunch of mattresses and stuck a pea at the very, very bottom and said, if she's a princess, then she'll know. And in the morning, they asked her how she slept, and she said, oh, just terribly. I just kept getting poked and jabbed all night, and I'm just bruised from head to toe.
Yes. Yeah, there's a beginning part where there's a prince who refuses every princess to marry, and he's picky, and then and there's like a backdrop to it where Hans Christian Andersen, who's Danish, and it's not a Danish story, it's actually probably Swedish, maybe, but for him it was about him being an outsider to the nobility, and he felt he was like really sensitive and had royalty in that sense, and belonged in part of their group, and they were always, making him an outsider, in spite of him being a world famous author. But so the Princess and the Pea also came into play in my life when I've spoken a little bit about the kind of tracking that I was trained in. My first teacher, Tom Brown Jr., the kind of tracking that he was taught was based in this modality that we're looking at, right? So if you think of a walk as a wave, right? Right? So it's got projection, it's got collection, right? So we generate waves when we move around. In each track then, right? The track is, you could say, is the trough of the wave. Boom, right? And it's where we contact the ground and then deform the ground and create a wave there. And in the tracking I do, what is generated in that wave form, that is the track, you'll notice it has a deep part, a shallow part, and a deep part, right? And then it comes back up onto the surface, which we call the horizon. That's the wave, right? And you think about all the information that can be packed into a wave, right? Like a cellular signal, and then there's multiplex signals, and you got 4G, and you've got all these different ways, 5G's coming around, and all these ways of packing more and more information into a wave, right? Or a layering of waves. And I mean, that's what's going on the track. So just like in our exercise yesterday, when you think of, like, if I become aware of the camera, it starts pulling me forward, right? If I become aware of where I parked, right, it's like pushing me around, right? There's also organic processes that are happening in me, the metabolism and breath and all those things, and those are shifting my body around, right? If my breath is going up higher or going down lower, that's going to shift me around, right? And that's all going to register in the track. So one time when a group of students was spending time with our mentor, Tom, one of them asked him, well, how do you get so good at reading? I mean, it's like there's an impossible amount of information, and don't you just drown in it? Like, where do you start? How do you improve in it? And his response was, you've got to be like the Princess and the Pea, right? Wherever you go, whatever you're doing, you got to be just a little uncomfortable on your feet, right? Just a little, like, what's going on down there, right? So that's also how we have to be about immediate moment, right? If you're going to improve in this modality, which is about being in the immediate moment, right? It's not a path to virtue, right? We're not trying to make you better people. That's up to you, right? But as a line of inquiry, right? What we're coming back to over and over again is the immediate moment. What am I feeling in my body? And how is that interfacing with the environment, right? So one of the what I'd like to do, because I feel like I just want to go over some terms that some folks maybe feeling like they're missing out on a little bit. So we've got our glossaries. Got a lot of dog folks here. This might be old. This will definitely be old news to some of you. But I just want to briefly recap how emotion flows. Right? So for Kevin, he's gonna talk about the dogs, right? Okay, but this equally applies to the person. Okay, so the dog has an eye, which is an energy projector, as we all know. Someone makes intense eye contact, right? That we feel it. So that's called the negative. That's the energy projector. And then the dog has an energy absorber end, right? It's called the positive, like in a very real sense. This is a map of also electrical current you can think of. So then the dog is, here we have another dog out of frame, right? And they're going to be connected, moving this way, and there's another one, right? And so this is how you get these systems of flows, right? All the animals lined up end to end and move, right? We have the same issue. We have our negative, we have our positive, right? You'll notice that when someone's turned around, right, and that your eye will be drawn to them, right? And then when they turn around and look at you, it's like a bubble was popped. Does anybody have that experience? Right? So that's the negative to negative experience, right? But you can also, if it's someone you have like a certain kind of connection to, or you're in a certain mood, you're particularly grounded, you make eye contact, and it doesn't pop, right? So then what you're kind of doing is you're finding a way to incorporate the negative and ground that energy, right? Does that make sense? Are there any questions about that?
The last part you go over about negative and grounding energy, that lost me a little bit.
Okay, perfect. Yes. So as we found out yesterday, that though different, each of us is going to have different physical memory, and we're going to take instruction a little differently and apply it differently, but underneath all that was a common experience that things that ground you make you more stable, right? Ways of thinking, ways of comportment of your body, feelings you have in your body, memories physically relived in your body, right? Those will ground you. Those will create a circuit, right? Things that are ungrounding, things that knock you off balance, then you're unable to find your way back to ground. Anger, fear, shameful memories, going up into your head and thoughts, right? All those experiences will cause you to be tippy, and you'll be basically a leaf in the wind. You'll be an effect in the world rather than part of organizing the system, right? For taking a role and making it more coherent. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah. So what we're really talking about is the act of grounding oneself so that we can begin to design by feel, design our relationships, to design our workplaces, to navigate with that feeling in the heart. That's what we're going for. So I'm going to be talking a bit about different ways of looking at that. And I'll even pull in stuff we've already spoken about and Kevin has already spoken about. But all this is happening in the immediate moment, right? None of this is happening Like, so construct a law also provides us with other tools. Like, we could like draw diagrams and like, oh, well, the flow system of the family and work, and we can create maps but those are all up in the head, right? And it's not that those aren't useful tools. Those are absolutely useful tools. But here this weekend, again, I encourage you to get a better sense. Not better ideas, right? Let's get a better sense of how to go by feel in a way that works. And so what that really means is that the feeling in the heart, the feeling in the gut, right? That feeling. So Kevin talks a lot about hunger over balance, balance over hunger. Basically, anytime we're talking about balance, we're off balance. And this can be like a bit of a confusing for folks new to this model. If you're worried about work-life balance, you're off balance. If you never talk about work-life balance, you're grounded. It's not a problem, right? So if anybody in this modality, ever in the immediate moment world, ever talks about balance, there's a lack of groundedness, right? It's always about being off balance, okay? Because the head is the primary organ of balance. But the way it responds, right? So we got eustachian tubes, we got eyes that navigate, it's all up in here. This is our navigational instrument. But as you remember, when you put your awareness up in your head, what happened, right? You got tippy. So it's a catch-22, right? The head is the best at keeping you balanced, it thinks. But as soon as it's put in charge, you're off balance, right? And this is the seat of thoughts, right? Now, certainly trust, like as Kevin said, trusting the confusion and thoughts bubbling up. That's a different kind of thinking. I would even call that like deep thinking as opposed to cognitive thinking, right? I mean, we're talking about two different things. And that's not saying that, never have cognitive thoughts, they're evil, right? Just know what you're getting into, right? If you're problem solving up here, that's one activity. And it's going to have consequences, right? You're going to be more reactive. You're going to be less resilient in the moment, right? You're going to respond to incoming energy in a way that's probably going to generate more friction, right? So everything, so that's fine, if you can have a private space to have your thoughts, or you can figure out a way to do that in a safe way that works. Right? So there's not one thing that is always good and one thing that is always bad. It's all about context. So in that sense, hunger balance, we can talk about when you are in hunger over balance, when that's primary. You can call that being at like ingestiveness. Like in general, I am an open pipe to the world. Incoming energy comes into me and goes down and into the ground, right? And it has to, otherwise I can't move, right? If the energy isn't going down on the ground, I'm going to fall over, right? So when I'm in that ingestive aspect, right? When I'm feeling that, things are going to happen more smoothly. You're going to have laminar experiences, smooth, even. Everything feels like it has plenty of time for you to respond, as opposed to turbulent experiences where you're like, oh my God, I'm crazy busy, right? That when you're saying you're crazy busy, that means you're having turbulent experiences, right? Or there's just not enough time in the day. Turbulence, right? Where if you ground that energy, the time in the day goes boom, right? And expands, right? So it really is, it is how we are, what we pay attention to is going to organize the world around us and organize our experiences. And in this sense, it gets back to Zhenya's comment about train yourself, right? Not others. They will organize, they will fall into place as appropriate according to their own role in the big want, right? They will fall into perfect accord. And if you sufficiently find your own grounding, right? And you can always grow grounding, which, let's talk about that. So Kevin talked about a pure want. Another way of thinking of the ability to maintain a pure want, and a pure want is weightlessness, is being pulled, is, remember all those things? It's like, and all the good feelings, you can be crying, you can be laughing, but if it feels good, you're in that pure want. If it feels bad, you've fallen out of it, right? But another way of thinking about the pure want is emotional capacity. Now, this is a direct analog to the idea in an ecology of the carrying capacity of the land, right? So animals, the paths of animals, the dens, the lays, the feeding areas, vascularize the landscape, right? Just, wow, wolves change rivers, right? So they vascularize the landscape. And the land can hold, since the relationships can stack and compound so intricately and well, right? The land can hold a certain amount, and often, more than we'd think, right? If there's a diverse assortment of animals, right? If there's a single kind of animal and one kind of resource, it's going to be bad, right? So in this sense, diversity is good. And one of the many reasons why constructal law supports notions of diversity and inclusion, right? And because the physics of diversity is more resilient systems, right? So if what we want to do is have a land have a greater and greater carrying capacity to its reasonable limit, right? And that means richness and diversity, right? Well, so internally, you are an internal ecosystem, right? And internally, there's a capacity and a vascularization, right? And this is going to be all the different contexts in which you live, all the different relationships you have, the different kinds of people, the different skills you're wanting to learn, the different ways you're wanting to move and where you want to move, right? That's the mapping of the outer world onto your inner world, right? So open me up and I'm a map of the world out there. Look out there and that's a map of the world inside me, right? One of my mentors said, look inside a rabbit's brain and you'll see every trail it ever ran down, right? That they are their trails. We are our trails, right? So you can expand emotional capacity just like you can expand carrying capacity, just like what happened at Yellowstone. If you introduce the heart more and more with greater frequency and a deeper intention, your internal carrying capacity is going to expand, right? If you allow yourself to have a pure want, if you give yourself that permission and start making room for yourself to have things simply because they please you, and because, not in a narcissistic sense, but a pure want means everybody getting what they want, right? So this isn't about narcissism, right? This isn't about I got mine, right? Because that's exactly contradictory to a pure want. A pure want is the deep intelligence of the big want. So I get what I most want, right? When we all get what we want most, right? So creating that ingestive pipe, encouraging yourself to feel your body, encouraging yourself to feel for things that make you feel weightless in your heart, right? You can actually walk and feel for what feels most grounding in every moment, right? I can also walk and feel for what makes me feel tippy. Like, we can go either way. This is like completely within our choice. So just like with a magnet, when emotion is flowing through us, it's going to flow through us in a certain tone. And that tone, when it's a true feeling, right? One of those good feelings is going to generate a field that is coherent and will organize the people around us in a good way. So, you know, you have all the iron filings, right? They organize around this magnet. The magnet's not manipulating them, it's not controlling them, it's not telling them what to do. The filings are just like, oh, this is where I need to stand, right? This is where I need to stand. And there's nothing external the magnet's doing, right? This is just the magnet is internally organized, which organizes the world around the magnet. So when you're ingestive, you generate these coherent fields, right? When you're focused on body feelings, good feelings in the heart, when you're focused on the skills of critical feeling, over the skills of critical thinking in that moment, right? As you've decided, you're cultivating the critical feeling, you're going to find, again, as Kevin mentioned, that comparison of one thing to another, what I got to what you got, of what I have now to what I could have in the future, to expectations, you're falling out of it. If you're comparing, you're falling out of it. There's only one feeling where you're using critical feeling, and that feeling is where to flow. That's it. If you're in your heart and you're using your heart intelligence, the compass is pointing where to flow next and how, right? It's never going to have you compare. Compare, pop, you're up above, right? If you're ever splitting yourself into self and other, you know, if you're having a conflict with someone and you're seeing them as an outside force rather than an internal force, you've fallen out of the critical feeling, right? So, comparison, self and other, anger, you're falling out. Fear, you're falling out. Guilt, right? You're falling out. Also, overall, so these are obvious big signs, right? You're having big thoughts, you're comparing things, you're, internal dialogue, but even in a more subtle way, right? We can overall have an ingestive aspect. We can also overall have a rejective aspect, okay? So, if in this way, it's good to do some kind of movement practice, yoga, martial arts, running, where your coach, whoever you're working with, is helping you to understand your body and how the body protects itself from injury, right? And the alignment of the body that is most healthy is going to be hips a little tucked in, shoulders down and back, right? Smooth, relaxed shoulders, right? Knees not locked, knees soft, right? There's an overall ingestive formation of the body where like energy can run smoothly. If your belly starts spilling out, what in Tai Chi and Chi-based martial arts, they call that the cauldron of Chi is tipped over, right? And it's pouring out, right? And you're walking around, and you'll see people walk around with their bellies. Oh, well, then you're going to get, back injury. And you can also be pushed over really easy, right? So tip the cauldron of Chi up, right? Or whatever your, the movement discipline that you follow. I encourage you to explore that and learn from it. What signs in my body are telling me that everything's not quite right? That I've started to rise up out of my heart and into my head, right? Another good one is I do boxing, and there's a kind of punching where the instruction is to pull back faster than you're going out, right? So you hit the bag and pull back, right? So that's an overall pulling motion, and you'll find like overall, ingestion is about pulling in, right? No matter what you're doing, right? You can be throwing a frisbee, right? But if you really pay attention to it, a good, healthy throw that is centered, you're actually pulling in. You're pulling in, right? Small handcrafts, right? If you're for human beings, our grip is also our bite, right? So if I'm ingestively working with these handcrafts, it feels good, and I feel like I'm pulling them in. Now, on the flip side, a rejective stance would be, I'm going to punch and I'm going to push that away, right? Or I'm going to dance with you and I'm going to push you away. These are all balance behaviors. This is what we do when we're like, crap, I'm falling, right? Right? Or someone comes in and you're like, no, right? So what the balance mind, the big brain in the head wants to do is say, stop. Don't rock the boat. Go away. Don't come closer. Slow down. In fact, no change at all, right? Because I need room to navigate. Everything's too fast. Right? That's what this had. So everything that comes out of that brain when you're in that space are all what I've done yesterday, what habits from this past life, or from this life, and habits from ancestral lives that inform my DNA and my body, right? It's all old stuff that's already happened. Whereas the heart is always going to say the fresh stuff, perfectly adapted to this moment that has never happened before, right? So there's two different kinds of information. Now, as Kevin mentioned, there's a time and a place for instincts, right? Dogs don't do well out in the wild because they are pure heart, right? So again, I'm not saying all instincts are bad. We're here because of our instincts. Thank goodness for our instincts. But also, if you're cultivating resources for the most resilience in the moment to the shifting of the environment, right, then cultivate critical feeling. Critical feeling. So that's a rejective aspect, is all those issues, right? It's stiffness. It's when you feel your belly starting to push out, your knees starting to get locked. You're walking on your heels. That's a big one. If you're starting to get sore feet as you're walking, you're rejecting the ground, right? The ground is there to work with. Gravity is a force for good. If you really get down in the animal body that you inhabit, you'll find that you come float up on the balls of your feet and you're on your toes, right? And the heels are just there for giving you little touchdowns to help you. But we do a lot of heel-toe walking, right? And that's because of how much charge we're carrying around because of the map of the emotional landscape around us, which is incredibly predatory, right? And traffic lights are predatory. Cars are predatory, We sit in predatory chairs and we look at predatory screens, right? They're all projecting energy all the time, right? And there's very few places that flip that. And I would say the Kennedy School is a great example of here we've got a wall of green, right? The lights are soft, right? So it encourages a purer want in these kinds of spaces. Whereas fluorescent lights, cubicles, whatever, you're going to pop that bubble, right? And everybody's going to be just doing what they got to do to survive, right? So you can change environments too. This isn't just about you and what's within you. It's make it easier on you to cultivate these skills. Change your environment, shift your world. Where in your life are you saying, I should just tough this out? Or I should just lump it? Or if I really was, I would be able to get over this. Because none of that is critical feeling, right? What critical feeling is saying is, how do I reorganize my inner self or my outer world so that, now I have that feeling, right? I'm seeking it. I'm feeling for it. Where do I flow? A big piece of flow is finding elements in your environment that have resistance to them, right? That resist you flowing through them and past them and over them, is taking them and incorporating them into you in bite-sized, easy pieces that don't pop your bubble of want, right? Find the right sweet spot, but don't pop the bubble. And if the bubble pops, shrink the size of that negative, right? Or find a different negative, right? So, for example, this is actually a big one. I like this, the find another negative. So, if you're having problems, if there's like politics and personality and infighting, and you're like, which happened to me a couple of years back, moved to a new job in a new place, my support system was missing, and I was having lots of work politics. And I realized I was kind of drowning in the pettiness. I was like, God, how did I get so petty? You know, why am I gossiping about this person or that person? Well, my attention was divided. Too many tiny stressors. What I needed was a big negative to organize me, right? So I started doing cold immersions. And I was living in a little pool house, guest house, that out the front door was a pool that was like 50 degrees, right? And I started diving in there. And boy, did that reorganize my life, right? Like at work, I was like, whatever. You're not a 50-degree pool. You know? Where before I was going to bed furious and waking up furious about work. I was pretty pissed. Suddenly, I was going to bed sort of pensive in the morning and waking up and because I'd resolved the first thing I would do is dive in the pool and waking up with my heart going gunk, 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 gunk. Oh my God, here we go. And it worked beautifully. Another way of thinking about find a bigger negative is like it's an old chestnut that all we need to do to come together as people is just find someone a bigger enemy than each other, right? Aliens or Russia or whatever, right? And you can see a lot of that clutching going on right now. Like, we need a bigger enemy, and then everybody's the enemy, or nobody is, right? But it's true that I would say if you find a bigger, truer negative, not a person, but a force. So again, back to that movement art. Take up some kind of movement or sports. What is the way that you can ground your body that you love, right? Find that bigger negative. The water is cold, but you know what? The water is never going to yell at me or judge me, right? It's never going to beat me up. I beat myself up, right? And I can feel that. It's all me. If I get in that water, it's my choice to go out, and the water's just like, come on in, right? So find that bigger, more what we would call prayful negative, right? The only resistance is in you, and help that to reorganize what really matters in your life, right? And see how petty the problems that you used to have become. I know a lot of people who go into martial arts, and this is like flipping a switch, you know, or like there's the movie Fight Club where he was like that volume was turned down on the rest of his life because of this intense relationship he had and experience where he was physically interacting with other men, right? And it just like everything else seemed really small. So, but it's got to work. Like if you go and you do something else and you're like, I'm going to do skydiving, and it's terrifying, and it's just like, and you scream all the time and it's awful and you're having nightmares about it. You're just adding charge, right? The negative is way too big, right? Find a more prayful negative or smaller negative. But remember, in order for us to flourish, we have to find new negatives and incorporate them into us and move well with them. Either ingest them or join them, right? You can't eat them, join them. So, and as you navigate that again, like when you are uncomfortable, when something doesn't feel quite right, when you've lost a true feeling, that is its own reason for acting. So, acting to change the situation, right? Acting to find flow again, right? We, almost all of us, come from families where we had to explain our feelings and justify them, right? So the head goes to war against the heart. But the head is a terrible master, right? But a wonderful servant. The heart is our master, right? Our heart and our gut, our social brain, are our true directions, right? So when you have a feeling, that is data. That is its own information, right? It's sort of like, the situation with climate change, right? I mean, 1985, I was looking out my window and noticing there wasn't as many frogs out there as there used to be. Like there's abundant data, right? There's always abundant data, and we can improve it. But that first inkling was enough. Right? That first piece where we were like, this doesn't feel right. So if it doesn't feel right here, one step to the left and see if it changes. Right? Flip your polarity. See if you feel better. Go into a different space, another room. Change your clothes. Right. Change the feeling. And stop talking with that person. Something's not right, right? Shift, move, adapt, flow, right? Follow your heart in this critical feeling sense, not in the romantic sense. Now you've got a bunch of allies in this work, and they're called emotional grounds. And we've already talked about the bigger negative as one emotional ground, right? If it involves the body, if it involves potential good feelings, right, then it's an emotional ground. If you get a massage, for those of you that can relax in massages, right? That's a potential emotional ground. Water is an emotional ground, a well-known emotional ground. We love to look at water. We love to wade in water. We love to play in water, right? Who has been just entranced by watching the light sparkle on the waves at like a lake? Okay? It is the exact analog of the caveman TV and the fire, right? And the campfire. Those are the same thing. Fire is playful when you watch it. It's like endlessly engaging, right? So is the water, right? Good smells. That's an emotional ground. Smells. Water. Anything that's soft, rhythmic. Music, right? Movement, conversation.
Can be.
What's that?
Can be.
Yeah, if it's soft and rhythmic, right? So this is all in context, right? There's not one thing that is always a thing, right? So you can make yourself more comfortable. You can change the environment. You could be warmth. Right? Food, like Kevin mentioned, right? Emotional grounds. Just put movement, as we already mentioned. So all these are, finding your emotional grounds are all ways of like clearing out the static so you can re-home in on that signal of where to flow next, where is the empty space, the vacuum that's pulling you in.
Looks like the same list as the oxytocin booster.
Yes. Yes, and all these items are what we would call playful aspects or playful essences. Hair, smelling hair is an awfully fun activity, right? Kids love to smell their parents' armpits, right? I mean, the younger you are, the more you allow yourself to indulge in some of these things. So you have like kids playing with their goo stuff. I find it disgusting, but they have like these cans of kids play goo, and the goopier the better, and yeah.
Is touch on that list, or is
It's exactly on that list.
Combination of any of those things. Too.
Yeah.
Soft, warm.
But soft, rhythmic, warm touch would
Right.
be, yes.
Yeah,
But yeah, contact, we could call that contact.
Yeah.
All these feed into each other, right? So if it's a harsh chemical smell, not right. So they're all informing all the others, yeah.
One thing that makes me think of is like, I was thinking of like a hug, but then there's also like, you know, in boxing or things like that, when you get kind of like that, you know,
Yeah.
there's like a moment of clarity that's grounding in and of itself.
Right.
That kind of shock. I don't know if that's related in terms
It's exactly,
of
it's
like
the,
grounding, but it, you know, because it seems predatory, but it also is. I don't know if that could be.
so because you've changed on the inside, you've organized the world of stimulus around you so that they now have new values. So something that to another person would be an incoming predatory force, like overwhelming resistance that would knock them off balance, cut off their connection to their body, right? To you, just increases your emotional capacity and your hunger to move through it, right? It's classic, right? This is why, in sports, you have like the chants before a game, we can do it. That's, okay, incoming energy, movement together. I can feel all of us, we have this big one, and we're going to get this bigger thing, and it's like tuning into that. Whereas when you're going to lose is when, wow, the guys are going to beat me up for not catching the ball, and so now self and other comparison, I'm separate, I'm not part of a larger one, I'm lost, I'm off balance, right? So you're always trying to hook yourself into these emotional systems. Find the big want and be with it, right? Be with that feeling that we all have together, right? It's funny, Esther Derby has an expression that she uses in the world of organizational consulting where she's like, as a coach, you're coming into a new environment, so there are really 3 things you need to do. If you have something of value and you're confident in that, and you've observed them, right? She says, center yourself, which is another way of talking about grounding. Enter as a guest and acclimate, right? Wait and wait and wait and wait. Wait, collect data, and feel it. Collect data in here, right? Feel, and then turn the group to where you feel they can go next in a way that's going to work for all of them, right? So, I'll write that down. Can I get a flip chart, Ringo? I'll post these up. Oh, I think we need tape. Yes. Center. Enter. And this is an old Aikido saying she got from Jerry Weinberg. Yeah, so Jerry Weinberg is an author and coach and consultant who's practiced Aikido also his whole life and introduced this into the world of software coaches. And so center, enter, turn is another way of thinking about it, for sure. You'll find these articulations over and over, but we're talking about these fundamental forces that when I center myself, the world will just naturally organize around me if I can get to that true feeling, right? Of course, it's going to organize a different way if I can't get to the true feeling, but if I can feel good, the world will organize around me. I have all these allies to feeling good. It doesn't just have to be me. I can give myself things and help, right? I don't have to just be like a samurai of, intent and, no, take care of yourself. And it builds the strength of your pipe, of your ability to maintain your want and your true feeling of weightlessness in your heart, right? So, just as a check-in, so can everybody look around the room and feel your body as you look. feel how your inner feeling changes depending on what you're looking at. You can look out the window, you can make eye contact with people, you look at the food, look at the walls, look at me. Okay. Notice how there are some areas, are we all noticing how there are some areas that are easier to look at than others? Right? Does everybody notice that? Does anybody not notice that? Okay. So that's the map. That's the emotional map. Where you look, because this is the navigational instrument, is where you can flow. Right? Sight is our headlights, right? So if I have my brights on, you'll notice I can drive faster, right? With more confidence. When my brights at night, when they're turned off, right, I can slow down, right? It changes how I move, how far I can see, and what I look at. If I'm surrounded by predatory elements, whether people's eyes or elements of the environment, I'm in like a steel cage or something, I'm going to go in on myself. I'm going to move more and more slowly. I'm going to feel more and more off balance, right? So this world we have is it's a world that can be interpreted by the head as forms, but there aren't forms. There's only emotional value, right? It's all emotional value. This is why dreams can be like all over the map. You know, you're married to your father and your dog is your uncle and there's a clown who's like a baby and what's going on and you don't have a baby and you don't even have an uncle and what's, it's because all of those are emotional values. They're all emotional values, and your dream self, which is your heart self, your dreaming self, knows that. It's like, oh my God, that feeling and that feeling, like clowns are actually scary. They're not funny, right? And then that is that, it's like it is completely honest and cuts right to the truth of the matter, right? I mean, I call it wise, but it's even more than that. It just like cuts to the heart. This is the real emotional situation, right? So a chair is not just something to sit on, right? Water isn't just something to drink, right? These are emotional experiences. And that's your dreaming world, is all in that language. Poetry is that language. Right? And metaphor, when it's in the heart, is that way. When we're doing things to be pretty and for surface and for show, like cleverness is back up into the head. And that's fine, but it's not grounded, right? So it's not as adaptive and resilient for the purposes of critical feeling, right? But doing things that feel obvious, some of you might have experience from the world of improv where they say, do the obvious, always. Don't be clever, right? So that's what we're doing moment to moment. If we're following the flow, it's like, well, of course I would step over here. Well, why did you do that? It was just the obvious thing. It is its own reason, right? I mean, that's the feeling you get. You don't have to explain the obvious, but explaining the clever, oh yeah, okay, I was doing this, and right? So that's another way of looking at it. Just always do the obvious, right? But in a deep sense, and oftentimes it'll be surprising to the people around you. What is obvious to you? So in the glossary, we also make mention of this idea of relief, release, and resolve. Relief, release, and resolve. So we're emotional batteries. Right? We take on charge and we discharge. Right? The relief is one way when the charge gets so much and you feel the pressure in your head and you're going to explode. I mean, maybe you'll have a terrible accident. Maybe you'll make a terrible decision, right? You just need some way to get it out. So this is the world of recreational drugs, perhaps, or the world of going and getting in a bar fight, or arguing with a domestic partner, or yelling at your dog, right? That's all relief. relief. So what relief does, actually, is defers the charge. And there's real survival reasons to defer the charge. As you can probably guess, most relief is not done in a survival context. It's done out of convenience because it's the easiest thing to do. Just bam, cuss at someone, road rage, discount another point of view or whatever, just because it's dumb or whatever. That kind of thinking, that's discharge, right? But all it does is defer it. It just defers it. And in some ways, it can stack it higher quite often. So in a bar fight, you just double your charge, right? Argue with a friend or a partner, you just like stack charge upon charge, right? Now there's even more to resolve. So another way of managing in the moment, this fact that you've got a whole lot of charge, is what we call release, which are these worlds of emotional grounds. Right? You know what you do that makes you feel more grounded. Sitting in a quiet room, that special time in the morning before anybody else wakes up, watching a TV show that you find especially affirming, whatever it is, like what it is. And it could even be like surprising and maybe seem to go against the rules of this. But if it works, right? A ground is a ground. If afterwards you feel more centered, more on balance, more heavy on your feet and solid, well then it worked, right? Maybe you have a journal you write in, right? A therapist you go to. So those would all be methods of release. But release also doesn't incorporate the negative. You got that charge in a real way. You got that charge because of difficulties at work, skills you're struggling to master in the world, traffic, right? Whatever, You got that charge because of moving through the world, right? So if relief defers the charge and release drains the charge, but it leaves you more or less unchanged, right? Then the third one that we're always trying to get to, but while managing the fact that we're just human beings and we need what we need the help we can get, is to resolve the charge. And we can carry a charge for our entire lives and just finally resolve it on our deathbed. Happens all the time, right? I think I heard just the other day, it might have been Mindy who was telling me that there was a soldier who was the only one who survived from his unit. His entire life felt guilty about it, entire life, and had nightmares and had struggles in his relationships and hard time at work, and decades and decades passed, and then finally he's on his deathbed, and all the soldiers, his experience was all the soldiers, all his best buddies were there, standing there. He's like, no, dude, it's okay. No, it's totally fine. We understand. We're glad you made it, right? So, and then he felt the release, and then it was resolved, right? He felt that charge drain in a way that changed him. It wasn't just charge leaving, because, at least my shoulders feel looser because I got a nice massage, but not because my boss is any less of a jerk, right, or whatever, okay? So we're always going for resolve. We're always going for actually incorporating that resistance into us and growing our system so that we can organize more of the world just by who we are standing in our center, right? But sometimes you can't do it, right? Sometimes you need to yell into a pillow, you just need something else, right? You need to go into the mosh pit, whatever, and that's fine, there will be more charge, I guarantee it. So here's a picture of managing those incoming resistances. Now, the other thing I'd like to talk about too is anybody aware of how actuaries see the world in terms of life changes, right? So, has anybody heard of the point system, right? They keep points, right? Okay. So if you have changes in your life, say you get married, you get divorced, you get promoted, you get fired, you have a child, you lose a child, right? To them, they're like, married, 10 points, divorced, 10 points, have a child, 15 points, lose a child, 15 points, right? It's all change. So they're like, all these points add up to the likelihood that you will have a major injury. Promoted, had a child, got married. Oh my God, this guy is, jeez. Right? Yeah, new house, new car. Oh my God, somebody save her. Right? So what's funny is all of these forces that we are trained to think of as good are actually new negatives coming into our world. I mean, and I'm sure you can instantly go there. A new marriage is a whole new map of negatives, right? Loads of them. New house, whole new map. Oh, the bills and the repairs and that, right? Promotion, new responsibilities, and all your familiar stuff taken away. That's which is familiar. Right? Predatory aspects are strange, new, So you have to take into account all these issues. So if you find yourself where you feel like you got to a pretty good place with critical feeling, and then you just spend a whole week going, what is my deal? I'm snapping at people. I tripped going up 3 steps. It happened to me, right? I can balance on a handrail, and I tripped going up 3 steps. What happened to me, right? If you're thinking those things and wondering what's going on, well, look at your map of your actuarial map, right? It's like incoming new negatives, your entire environment changed. Right? Those are all new things to manage. There's no cheating it, right? The emotional topography is different, right? And when it's different, it's far more predatory, right? And so staying in your heart becomes more challenging. And that's okay, that's what we want. We want new negatives, but you've got to meter them. You got to titrate the negatives, right, for you chemistry students. Right? You got to bite-sized pieces, introduce them into your life, right? And you want to see how big they can get, but without popping the bubble, right? And you can do spikes. Kevin talks a lot about a baseline and then having a spike. And that's invigorating, right? So you can, if you at work, if it's like do-do-do, whatever, and someone comes in and is like, okay, there's a cool new thing and we got to learn this new technology fast, and you're like, yay, and a spike, right? And the whole system becomes more resilient, right? Or students at school, who are used to one way, and then they're given a challenge, a group challenge. Let's all do this together. Okay, that's a spike, right? So if you go to the gym, right, and you're used to one way of lifting weights, and then you say, you know what, this week I'm just going to see how much weight I can lift in one go, right? You've got a coach to make sure you don't injure yourself, but you just do that. You've changed everything. You're going to do 1 rep maximum, right? So these changes, these temporary changes, are spikes, right? And that's another way of thinking about that bite-sized pieces. Instead of just incremental, more and more, you can be wave, spike, wave, right? So that leads, so the actuarial notion also leads into this other idea that when you are tippy, when you are reactive, I would actually say, to get a little cosmic on you, that you are in an entirely different dimension, right? You are in a dimension where accidents happen, where freak accidents happen, right? Oh, I was doing this, and I was zipping up my thing, and I got caught on the thing, and then the noose went around my neck, and right? That is a dimension, right? If you ever had one of those days, that's what that was. That is the world of being in the rejective mode, right? And not in your heart, right? It's far from ingestive. So in that world, quite literally, in terms of the physics of your body, you could be riding your bike, and this happened to me, right? You can ride your bike, and you can ride over an obstacle that you didn't see and be ejected over the front of the handlebars because you're head heavy. Pop, right? Or you ride over that same obstacle and go ka-thunk, ka-thunk, because you're belly heavy. And it's just where you were. So when I was riding my bike home from work in the dark, and it was like, the light changes and suddenly 5 o'clock is midnight, right? Right. So I'm riding in what used to be a clear bike path. Now I'm like, I can't really see, and there's street lights 100 feet apart. And so I'm riding and I'm grousing, in my head about work, and I'm like, oh my God, I get this feeling. I need to get out of this rejective mode of gossip. I need to get into my body fast. Like I just felt it really strong. Like get down, like get deep in there, right? Get into that heart feeling. Get heavy in the belly. So I went in there, and sure enough, ba-bum, ba-bum, I ran over this huge block of wood, right? And it would have absolutely ejected me over, right? It was going downhill. It was the worst scenario, right? But I went from one dimension to another. So there's a parallel universe where Willem had an accident that night. But I ran over the same obstacle. Like it was all, you know what I mean? Like what happened? He had an accident. I didn't have an accident. He rode over this obstacle. This is the same obstacle I rode over. But he had the accident and I didn't, right? He had the argument and I didn't. He had the divorce. So he was fired and I didn't, or got the promotion that it gave him the major injury, then I didn't, Like, so this is how the world organizes around you, right? So the ingestive world is also the world of good luck. Like, I just don't know how that, I'm just a lucky person, I guess. I got a promotion, I met the right person at the right time, I found the right house, I have a great new teacher for like yoga or this, and I don't know why, it just happens to me, whatever. Like, lucky people are in their heart. And so those opportunities organize around them and come to them, right? And the best in them, as constructor law dictates, the best in them also organizes to go out to the people around them, right? So it's like a complete exchange, right? Whereas the rejected people are like, oh man, Portland sucks, and nothing works, and I don't know, people are jerks, and politics is crazy, and it's like, so there's definitely, in a sense, there's this, there are like really interesting layers here, I think, wide open for exploration. Right? And so everything I've talked about so far has just been my experience of moving through this material for the last, say, 3 years, since I first heard about Kevin. Certainly I have a background in an exploration of this kind. I'm a reflective person. Yes, I've been doing martial arts for 25 years, 30 years. But I think like Marty mentioned, the immediate moment theory has pulled so many disparate insights that I've had and experiences and pulled them into a center where now I can navigate with it. It's like a real compass. And things make a lot more sense. So, as you move forward, as you sit there in your chair right now, the more intrigued you are about what is bubbling for you right out of your own body in the present moment, the richer this body of work is going to be for you, right? And the more insights are going to be generated. And certainly that's my experience. And the more it's going to get you better at other skills, like me and my tracking, right? Where I had teachers telling me stuff, and like, I don't get it. But then now I understand it, right? The more you'll be able to make those kinds of connections. So, thank you for listening.
Thank you.